So the floor is yours. Thank you for giving this workshop.
Hi all. Yeah, very excited that so many people are joining today. My name is Gregor Kalinkat. I'm also a postdoc at IGB, and I've been giving this lecture, small course on social media for scientists for a couple of years already. I think the first time in fall 2019, and then I've been doing it um, the following years. um, on my own until, yeah, there was this big change in the social media landscape that probably all of you have heard of um, in yeah 2023, and then we did not have a course last year, but I asked Phoebe to join me, and now we're giving this course as a tandem. And I think it's much better now because Phoebe is very much active on Instagram with a slightly more, yeah, um, different approach, I would say. And both are very interesting. Both like more the visual approach of Instagram and also the more text-based approach on the other platforms that we will talk about. And yeah, so I will start. This course is trying to get this going. Ah, you see, um, that's us. I see that Phoebe still hasn't changed the doctor on her personal IGB webpage, but she is a doctor, just to make sure.
I will
Yeah.
at some stage.
Not judging, just just want to clarify. Like these are screenshots from the. Oh, and mine is also a pretty old one because I'm still in department one on this screenshot, so never mind. Okay, so as I said, like this is a shortened course. We ran this last week as a, I think 3.5 to 4 hour two-part workshop, and today we will try to pack all of this into 2 hours. So the first part is the lecture style part, mostly in a yeah. Um, yeah, as a lecture, and we give you an overview of various platforms where you can do social, science communication on social media, um, and some differences and some things that are similar between these platforms and what they are there for. And in the second part, we try to have some little tasks to introduce you into a bit more active science communication practices, and Phoebe has prepared some tasks for that. So I hope we stay more or less in time. The first part should be about an hour, um, and um, the second part can also be for more discussion and not only the task. So. Yeah, so the first question would be, like as a doctoral student or as a early postdoc, you might ask yourself, yes, but why should I be on social media, or why should I do science communication beyond writing and publishing my papers? So um, my phone is ringing. I think I can answer that later. Yeah. The question would be like, is just doing science well and publishing in like in great journals and like publishing, working on really like novel problems with advanced methods and innovative approaches, like, is that not enough? And you might say like, yes, on paper that's enough for a doctoral student and should be enough to get your paper published and um, to receive your doctorate after 3 or 4 years. But so I think this is a great example. This is a tweet from I think 2022, from then IGB doctoral student Sophia Lukatis. And you see on this the numbers below the content in this tweet. So this was on Twitter back when it still was named Twitter. And you see that Sophie shared one of her papers. I think it was a meta-analysis um, on Twitter, and you see that it got more than 5,000 retweets. So more than 5,000 people thought this was interesting enough to share it with their followers. And it got more than 20,000 likes. And I can tell you from experience that should be something between 100,000 and 500,000 impressions, so single views. So like really 6-digit numbers have seen that somebody has published this paper. So um, just like I think that's the one of the most obvious and most important parts that you should do this. Like there is so much science done and so much papers, so many papers published that taking this opportunity just to increase the likelihood that people interested in your research really will find it. And so this is one of the reasons why like I would recommend yeah sharing your science and your insights on social media and also connecting with the community of people who share the same message, share the same interest, and also would be interested in what you're doing. Yeah, I mentioned it already. The social media landscape is changing, has probably always been changing since it came to life around 2 decades ago. And for a long time, I would say between, yeah, around 2010, 2012 and 2022, 23, Twitter was the one social media platform that was really the go-to place for academics, for scientists, for science communicators. And yeah, as you see in this headline from a piece published in on the Science website in fall 2022, back then already, there was a first wave of people leaving Twitter. And so now what people used to do on Twitter happens on other platforms, or some of them maybe have also stopped using social media or at all. And one of the alternatives, or the one alternative that was discussed quite a lot in 2022, was Mastodon, which is like the functions are pretty similar to Twitter or to the old Twitter, but it's a collection of different servers, and like you have much more control over um, whom you interact with and who can see your stuff. And so this was the first proposed yeah replacement for the old science Twitter. And now for fast forward to 2025, and it seems now we can say that most of what happened in terms of or a lot of what happened before on Twitter in terms of science communication and sharing of science, discussing of science between academics is now moved over to Blue Sky. And you see again, Kai Kupferschmidt is writing about this for Science just 2 months ago. And yeah, also Nature had a couple of news pieces about this topic in the last couple of months. They also ran this poll. So a lot of people that follow Nature on social media also now use Blue Sky. And also in turn with regards to the yeah also politicization and also the political activities of Elon Musk, there was a particular big move or big wave of German academic institutions quitting X and yeah, they also like most of them have a presence on Blue Sky and on Mastodon now. So this was coordinated by the University of Düsseldorf, by their head of science communication. And yeah, so this is particular, I would say, even in the German academic realm, it's even a bit more pronounced than overall internationally. Yeah. So we now go a bit into like what social media platform um, um, offers you the different social media platforms. We're not covering every one of them, and as I've said, like the landscape changes a lot. So I mentioned a few of them that I think are important now, and also that I know a bit of, and then we can go back quickly to the question like why and what exactly. And you see this Venn diagram from Sabine Hostenfelder, who shows you like these are the things a scientist, and particularly early career scientists, has to do. And there are some things that you can do, then there are things that you should do to develop your career, and particularly to be seen by your peers and by the people that might hire you for your next postdoc, or that might read and cite your papers. And these things are all, I mean, they're not exclusively done on social media, for sure not. But I think all of this is increasingly done on social media by junior scientists, particularly, but also by senior scientists. So important, yeah, disclaimer before we go into the details, is that a couple of questions we cannot be yeah, consequentially resolved here. This is the question like how much time do I have to spend on social media or on science communications as a scientist? And this is something like that's really up to you. Um, my experience, and also I think the experience from other people that use social media a lot for science communication, it blends in with your private use. So you have to be careful, and there's always the possibility like of a time trap, and that you waste too much time on it. And you can definitely, if you want to really make sure that you don't fall into this trap, like it's really possible also to use these tools in a very restrictive way, and just sharing your papers, or like really for very restricted amounts of time. So this is possible, and I know that other people are doing this quite well, and so just want to make sure that like everybody has this in their mind, that like um, there is no one fits all answer to this question, but you should definitely think about it every now and then, because also like how you use social media for your science communication tasks is it develops also personally over time. Uh, the other question related to this, like how much of my like who I am as a person and not only as a scientist should go into my Twitter feed or my other social media presences. So this is also something that like you have, or everyone has to find their own way of doing this. Like for example, um, there is this one paper I refer to by Paige Giroux and co-workers, and they had this experiment where they tried like or looked at like how the social media profiles on Instagram of scientists can change the stereotypes and the views of the general public about scientists. And so they really found that um, you can use social media to promote the view that scientists are just normal people, which sometimes help you get through. with your message. And so these are things like, as I say, like this is just something that we cannot resolve indefinitely, and each and everybody has to find their own way of yeah, answering this question. And also, like overlapping with these other two questions, like who is my main target audience when I'm on social media and when I'm like sharing and discussing my science? Because this also depends a bit like on which of the social media platforms that we will discuss you choose in the way, like as your primary yeah, platform. So do you want to connect with your peers and discuss methods, maybe, and very specific results within your like sub-discipline? Or do you want to reach a very general audience, or maybe just particularly reach policymakers and journalists, so your messages get amplified? So these are different, sometimes a bit overlapping audiences. And yeah, you should have these things in mind when deciding how to communicate and where to communicate. Another part that we don't touch on in this course is techniques and skills for content creation. For example, um, making like advanced videos or other things like that. There are special courses at IGB. I know there are special courses, but you can also find trainings for these things on other places. Okay, so as a junior researcher, like we can now come to the like essentials. So as I said already, like you have to be visible on the internet because yeah, if you um, apply for new jobs, if you apply for grants, or if people are looking for reviewers, for example, you have to have a internet presence, and the very like first thing that you should have is like a page on your institutional website. That really something that you should have, and you also should make sure that there's a photo there and some basic information. Of course, nowadays, like a lot of journals request that you register with your ORCID um, for your first submission of a manuscript. This also, yeah, helps people find you. Then once you have your first paper published, you can also sign up. I mean, you can sign up even before that, but particularly if you have your paper published, then having a Google Scholar profile makes it more easy findable. And you can also sign up for a researcher ID on Web of Science. This used to be Publons, but it's now integrated with Web of Science. And then there are the other things that like come on top of this. And yeah, the first thing would be a personal website where you really have like your own space and a permanent web presence. That like I would say is really yeah, not something that you definitely need as an early PhD student, but once you decide like to go for the academic career and like have one postdoc for 18 months or 2 years and then the next one, so really like you have a stable presence in the internet where you can showcase your research. And also like if people if editors at journals are looking for reviewers, they will have an easier way to find you. um, and if it's there for a longer time and you keep on adding publications to your record and also to your website, then in the long term, these personal web pages will rank higher on search results. So ResearchGate is like the social network for scientists where you share your papers. Also, like highly recommended as soon or latest when you publish like your first or second paper, so as to sign up for an account there, and it really makes it easy to share papers that are not included in your institutional subscriptions. So it's easy to receive papers that you have problems getting or accessing, and also for other people who might not access them. Facebook is also a place where you can do a lot of science communication, depending on who your target audience is. So I would say from experience, it's not the primary platform to connecting with other scientists, but as the slide states, like really like the average person is there, and if you are running like community projects where you have to connect with people on the ground, it's really worth it. But this was from 2022, as I said, like the most of the slides are from 2022. And back then it was recommended by Leibniz that we delete project accounts on Facebook because even if Instagram and Facebook are the same company, the data protection rules on Instagram are still a bit better on than on Facebook. And so we were discouraged to use this for like project or institutional accounts. So of course you can still have a like personal page where you also like share your research or, as I said, connect with people in your projects. Then of course there's LinkedIn. I've seen in the chat that a lot of people are using LinkedIn. Uh, my expression or my impressions over the last couple of months also was that a lot of people shifted their activities that they had on Twitter previously to LinkedIn. So the communication style and the content also changed a bit on LinkedIn. Um, over the last, yeah, 1 to 2 years. And yeah, it's a professional networking site, and like really absolutely would recommend for anybody who knows early on that they won't stay in academia. That's the place where you want to have a presence. And yeah, the slide says communication more formal than on other social media networks, which I think is still true, but it is also, as I said, like shifted a bit in the direction of the other networks. I wrote weird algorithms because, yeah, it's the way the algorithms works and puts like old stuff into your timeline is really sometimes a bit useless. So you get often like job ads that have expired 2 weeks ago or stuff like that. So that's one of the things that I personally find a bit annoying. Yeah, then there's Xing. I quickly introduced it here, so particularly also for people in Germany or in the German-speaking country. It's very similar to LinkedIn. It's smaller and it's the German LinkedIn more or less. Of course, that means that it's also um, a bit smaller, less active users, less activity, but also for finding jobs on the German market, probably not too bad also to have a presence there. Then there's Instagram, um, the more visual, the more visual platform. I think Phoebe will talk more about Instagram. Um, Compared to the other sites, it's really harder to share like links to your research there. Like it's not impossible, of course not, but if like the main like task you want a social media platform to do is sharing the link to your paper with other people, then Instagram is not the best solution. It's really like better for short videos and pictures of your research, I would say. Yeah, TikTok is also rising as a science communication tool. you will definitely find a younger demographic than on the other platforms, and yeah, slightly different demographic you will find. The algorithms, so what people will see and why, are even more opaque than on the other algorithms, I would say. And so, yeah, so I know that there are a couple of people who've been using it and who found it also, yeah, useful to particularly for sharing your research with the general public. And then, yeah, we have Twitter, now called X. Um, so this, as I said, like this is slightly modified an old slide that lists a couple of advantages that are, yeah, ceasing to be advantages because so many people are yeah, running away from X because of also changes to the algorithm. So this, so my slide still says external links work well, and that's not true anymore. So the algorithm changes that have been going on since Elon Musk took over now really means your content is punished if it has links to external stuff, for example, papers. So this is really like not so useful anymore. Um, yeah, what I always found interesting, and this is, I mean, this is also true for Blue Sky and Mastodon because basically, like technically, these three platforms work very similar in the way you create stuff and you share text-based content. So it's possible to with one tweet or one thread of tweets, you communicate rather to your like discipline or your sub-discipline peers, and with another content you can more tailor it toward general audience on the same account. So this is like relatively easy. Yeah, Twitter used to be great to get in contact with fellow academics, but also with journalists and politicians. That is not true so much anymore, as I said, like because it's changing a lot and a lot of people have left Twitter and shifted over to the other two mentioned platforms. Yeah, political turmoil, bad moderation, and yeah, changes to the algorithms that are basically bad for science communications, and all these things mean that it's becoming less important. So there are still a lot of people there, academics and also science journalists still use Twitter or X as it's now called, but I wouldn't like for a starter, I wouldn't recommend it today. Yeah, this was funny 5 years ago, but it's really not anymore. Yeah, and Blue Sky, I would say over the last 3 4 months, I would really say it has become the replacement for Twitter, and there are a lot of academics that have moved over to Blue Sky. Um, Blue Sky originally started as a side project within Twitter, and then became its own platform. It was invite only, so you could only join with an invitation link in the early uh, months, and then I think somewhere in late 2023 or early 2024, it was possible to sign up for everybody, and it's basically like the same functionalities as Twitter. You see also the profile page looks very similar. And of course, I mean, it's growing fast, but the reach is still like only a fraction of what you potentially had in 2021 on Twitter. Mastodon, I mentioned already. You see also like profile page on Mastodon looks very similar to one on Twitter or on Blue Sky, and it's the only true open source non-commercial network. There are no algorithms, so you can follow people and you can follow hashtags. Um, but yeah, how your timeline is created, there are no algorithms. It's strictly chronological. Opening an account is a bit more complicated because you have to choose a server first. But once you overcome this, there's a smaller but friendly and engaging community also for science communication. So this is just an overview of the platforms that I presented, and Mastodon and Blue Sky are the replacements for Twitter. Trying to wrap up quickly. Yeah, this was from late 2022. So you see the like uptick in people that moved over to Mastodon back then, compared to active users on Twitter. So you see the peaks in fall of 2022, and this is from the last couple of months. You see the overall registered users on Blue Sky, and you see like this rapid growth on Blue Sky. And as I said, like both platforms uh, have taken over a lot of traffic in the realm of science communication. And that's it. With that, I give over to Phoebe.
Thank you very much, Gregor. I'm going to follow on from that and go in a little bit more depth on some of the ideas that Gregor's just introduced. So I will now try and share my screen. Let me move the meeting chat away. How's that? That all good for everyone? Well, okay, cool. Yes, so a little bit more on why to use social media as scientists. This was my most successful post on Instagram. I did my PhD studying crocodile conservation, and this was one of our adult crocs with a lot of babies on her head. Off the back of this post, I got like 3,000 new followers, which was quite cool. So yes, a bit more about me on social media. So mostly I use Instagram. I have an Instagram account that's professional, which is very much focused around my research on crocodiles. I have recently got Blue Sky since everyone seemed to have moved over there, and I'm starting to get my head around that. And was previously on Twitter, but never as much as I was on Instagram, but it was useful. Particularly, I would post things of general interest, which kind of connected me up with journalists. So, for example, after posting this, I had multiple contacts from journalists who wanted to write about orange crocodiles in various different outlets. I also previously did a digital media internship with a science communication organization in the UK. So I did spend some of my life purely doing online science comm, and still do kind of a lot of that online with organizations like Nat Geo. So yeah, that's me. So why, since you're all here, I presume you want to use social media as a scientist. I was thinking either turn your microphone on and just give a couple of reasons why you would like to use social media as a scientist, or if you'd prefer, just type some things in the chat. We'll just have a minute or two to get you all back involved and participating. Go for it. Okay, awesome. Share knowledge. Yeah, fantastic. That's, yeah, a lot of what I do because I'm on Instagram and both more focused in that kind of knowledge sharing, science communication space, networking for sure. About to dive into that in more detail. Visibility as well. Yeah. Reaching out to students, reality of PhD, exchanging ideas, hearing what others are doing. Okay, awesome. Right. In this case, hopefully I've got something for everyone. So kind of broadly, I guess there are a number of different reasons that scientists are on social media. Um, I'm not going to particularly talk about advocacy and mobilizing action, even though that can be a really useful way to use social media because we are time limited. But I will go into a bit more detail in kind of building your brand as an individual and as a scientist, staying updated and networking and collaborating kind of within the academic community, and then more broadly looking at the things that fall a bit more under the bracket of science communication, so disseminating research findings and engaging and educating the public. So this study was done in 2016 on how academics use social media networks, but I think most of the reasons still hold true nearly 10 years later. So for networking and connections, so that's a really big one for making novel connections and relationships, both with kind of peers at the same level, but also kind of networking up and down to more senior or junior folks. These can be people, novel ones, so those you meet online, but also it's a really great way to maintain existing relationships. So whether those are colleagues you've worked with in the past or people you met in person at conferences, social media is a really useful tool for creating and maintaining relationships. And also to find role models, particularly at an early career stage, to work out what type of scientist you would like to be. As well as useful as a kind of conceptualizing platform, so using it to establish and project your identity online, whether that's kind of in a very formal academic capacity or more informally, and also as just kind of a bit of a coffee break to the online equivalent of, a coffee break at work, or at least pre-COVID, where you would all go down to a free room and chat. That kind of is also presented by social media. You can have sort of random and unexpected conversations with others. And then also for working out relationships with academia. So the study identified that these kind of increased with career stage. But for early career folks, it can be useful for finding a niche, finding out what type of scientist you would like to become. Then as careers progress, looking at extending the academic space. So, it's a way of reaching beyond your institute, as well as promotion and impact. So again, dissemination and SciComm. And particularly at later career stages, maybe for circumventing institutional constraints. So for example, there may be institutional requirements that a scientist might want to avoid, for example, doing additional outreach on a paper or stating that they don't hold the same view as their institute, and social media provides a platform for doing that. And then kind of encompassing all of that also as a space for academic freedom. So overall, this means that social media can have a pretty big mix of benefits and challenges. These are some from a large-scale survey in 2017. I won't go into all of them, but there are huge amounts of benefits, as I'm sure we've all thought about. It's a directory of academics, a way to find other people doing work you might be interested in. Of course, a way to disseminate your own work. There are particularly benefits for younger academics, for example, finding other people or senior academics who might be able to help you, as well as to raise your own profile and scholarly reputation, and just keep up to date with things like job adverts or grant opportunities that get advertised online. The flip side of that is there are an awful lot of challenges associated with social media. These can go from kind of the flip side of it being beneficial to find people to ask for help. If you are senior, you can get an awful lot of requests for help, and this kind of thing can really drain time. But there are also kind of privacy and security and digital inclusion issues, which I will only briefly touch on, but social media should be used cautiously, particularly if you, for some often completely unexpected reason, end up involved in some kind of online controversy, these can escalate out of control. And so things like when people have a large mix of their personal and professional life in social media, that can theoretically or in practice create real world problems. So for example, I never put anything on my social media that identifies where I live or who I hang out with in the real world, because once I hit about 3,000 followers, I started getting quite a lot of creepy people contacting me directly, and so I'm trying to avoid that. But on the flip side, also sometimes for your project, so I used to work on a critically endangered species, so we would try and not put any kind of geolocated information on, just in case there was risks associated. So although the risks aren't always going to materialize, it's just something that's worth thinking about. Okay, so there's kind of this, as Gregor mentioned before, these spectrum from very much kind of professional identity sites through to ones that are used to express your personal self. Kind of hard to have an online discussion, but if anyone has any views on whether they personally or generally think any particular social media site is more professional or personal, just either write in the chat or turn your microphone on and shout out. This is IGB, that's the institute me and Gregor are based at, and Katerina. And so I'd say that's very much at the professional identity end of the spectrum. So it's got, you know, name, papers, where your office is, you know, nothing that relates to personal life, through, in my opinion, something like Facebook, which if you went on mine, I've barely used since I was about 13, but you can get back to 13-year-old me and which Pokemon cards I was collecting at the time or whatever. So yeah, that for me, they're kind of the two ends of the spectrum. What do other people think? I've lost my chat. Oh no. Woohoo. Anyone? Yeah, for sure. I would say like ResearchGate and LinkedIn tend to be, yeah, definitely at the more professional end. This A is actually, that's academia. If anyone else is a social scientist, that one's like ResearchGate for social scientists. And LinkedIn also often kind of more professional, although things are shifting a bit, as Gregor mentioned. So yeah, to zoom back to the study I mentioned before, they were looking at the things that were active in 2016, so particularly Facebook, Twitter, and ResearchGate. And yeah, they expressed that there's kind of this personal identity you have on platforms such as Facebook, where you have your own family, your own friends from home, and your academic or friends or work colleagues, through to places like Twitter or Instagram, where you have kind of most everybody or could be anybody, through to things like ResearchGate, where these tend to be almost exclusively for scholarly or professional interactions. And then on these, you almost exclusively always have the public, whereas in things like Facebook and also Instagram, you do have the ability to have public and private profiles. So yeah, you do get these very different audiences on the different platforms, which shapes how you can and maybe also how you should use them. So I'm going to dive a little bit into identity on social media, about who you want to be and how you choose to present yourself online, and some of the kind of social science literature that explores that very briefly. So we construct our identity online. We don't put all of ourselves out there, and this is an active decision. This tends to be a mixture of demographic categories and interactions in different contexts with both people online and also your perceived and actual audience. And generally, this is thought to be a sort of a process of careful and deliberate selection and an assembly of symbols. What do I mean by symbols? It's a way that in everyday life, but even maybe more so online, when we're constructing an identity to present, we choose particular symbols to give that outwardly. So, for example, my social media presence is very much about being a crocodile scientist and a herpetologist. And so there is a hugely disproportionate number of images of me holding crocodiles, or even strange small plastic crocodiles, and kind of all these different things. Or, for example, if someone is a lab-based scientist, they may choose to be wearing a lab coat in an awful lot of, say, TikTok videos, even in circumstances where they may not actually be wearing a lab coat. So how we choose the symbols we use to put around us and present ourselves have an influence on how other people are going to perceive us. And social media enables this in multimodal ways. So there's the visuals, what we look like, what videos or pictures we're putting up, the audio, what we sound like or sound effects, as well as the content, so what we're actually choosing to say. And this is shaped by social and relational identities. So both our real peers, so people we're interacting with online who we may or may not know in real life, but also the audience that we imagine. So when we put up particular posts online, inevitably we're catering to a particular audience. I kind of, in my head, am imagining my 15-year-old self with a lot of my science communication and what she would have found interesting. Whereas on something like Blue Sky, I'm more catering to the kind of other folks that I might come across in the office and imagining them in a broader context and designing content for them. So this kind of networked audience is this idea that we have this imaginary audience to which we construct the posts. And as we've already talked about, the online presence connects with others both in the field and beyond academia. And in doing so, we kind of think about what community values we would like to appeal to, and therefore this kind of manifests as things like choosing what platforms to use and how to use them. If you just want to reach out to other scientists, you might choose to use Blue Sky or X, versus looking exclusively to the general public, maybe Instagram or TikTok, if you're interested in a younger demographic. Which biographical information to post. So if I was particularly interested in appealing to British people, to engage them in conservation, I might really lean into my Britishness in my posts. Whereas if I was looking to a more international audience, I would definitely reel that in, because a lot of people maybe have rightful concerns with Brits. Also, what images to use as portraits, choosing to use, for example, cartoons versus professional images versus more sort of casual or personal images, such as with pets. And also what type of languages to use. So I both mean literally, like, is my account going to be in English or Spanish or Nepali? But also in terms of using formal versus informal language to appeal to different groups. And to what their idea of what a scientist might be, either trying to appeal to that or to disrupt that. So I put these two pictures in because this is what ChatGPT came up with when I asked it to come up with a picture of a scientist creating a social media profile. So as you can see, I then changed it to a herpetologist creating a social media profile. And we basically got almost exactly the same, surprisingly hipster white man in a lab coat in an office with a blackboard. So this is very much this kind of stereotyped idea of what a scientist looks like that people try to choose to lean into or to disrupt. So to zoom out a little bit more, to think more broadly about the concept of identity and who we might want to be, I'm going to go back to Goffman's concept of identity, which he came up with in the 50s, which kind of thinks about identity as having a front stage. So that's the performance. That's the identity we project to other people, or in this case, that we choose to put on Facebook or Instagram or X. versus the backstage version. And that's kind of who you really are, who you are when you're not performing to your perceived audience. And so this has various aspects. So actively managing the impressions that one tries to make online in ways that align with kind of social expectations. So this is a bit what I mentioned before. So your choice of language, of behaviors, of symbols to include, photos to choose. And this can be quite strategic if you have a particular goal that you want to achieve with social media. There's then role performance. So who do you want to be online? That's the kind of the role you play. So do you want to be an educator? Then that's going to affect the social media you choose and the content versus, okay, I want to be a scientist who appeals to my peers, or a scientist who's using this opportunity to network up and get job opportunities. So choosing social media depends on kind of the roles that we want to play. And finally, identity as a social construction. So identity is not fixed, and it is created by interactions with others. So it's constantly negotiated, and it changes depending on the setting, the audience, and the social norms of the groups you're interacting with. And then there's also the aspect of stigma. So this is where there's parts of someone's identity that may be socially discredited, and this also impacts how people might choose to present themselves in social interactions. I don't know if anyone saw this movie that came out last year, but this is a much more fun introduction to the concept of identity than I can provide here. I very much recommend it. It's very entertaining, but it's a movie that basically looks at how you pretend to be different identities because that's what people expect, and how that in turn impacts who you actually are. It's a really funny movie, but it's definitely based on Goffman's work. Particularly as scientists, this persona is important for building reputations, which are actually really important in the real world and in careers. So this has been defined as the expert appraisal of a scholar's standing in their collegial reference group, so peers, which is collectively determined on the basis of their research achievements. And this has been shown to be very much about the visibility of those achievements to people who can then judge their value. So, for example, social media can improve or help your scholarly reputation as you can disseminate your research to different audiences. So whether they're potential PIs of the future or the public, disseminating manuscripts, so getting a wider readership, live tweeting from conferences, posting recorded lectures so people get a better idea of your work and what you're doing, as well as for connecting to people that you may want to in future. So they gave the example of people who share the work of authors they would like to be visible to. So by sharing the work of someone they might want to work with in the future, for example, they're making themselves visible to that person. So there's a lot of different ways that social media can potentially enhance scholarly reputation, which can then be useful for example, getting jobs in future. So kind of altogether, what I wanted to get across with this was that it's worth thinking about what you actually want to get out of being on social media, how you can construct your identity to help with this, and which platforms do you want to choose, or which version of yourself do you want to present in order to achieve those goals that you've identified. So now this is just a little pause, just to think about, before we have the session later, who are your favorite scientists on social media? At the end of this, I'll call like 5 minutes for just a little brief break for everyone. But if during that break, people could post who their favorite scientists are on different social medias, if you have one, I would be very curious. So now to end, just a little bit on science communication. So this can involve dissemination, so sharing your work to peers or the public engagement, and kind of one step beyond that, public education. So dissemination to peers, this paper came out that looked at whether posting your paper on Twitter got you more citations. And essentially, no. It found that although it boosted engagement, the impact of this wasn't to increase citations. And I think what this highlighted is that the reasons to post on or to be on social media are perhaps a little bit less quantitative or directly measurable than things like increased citations. It's good for outreach, for networking and knowledge sharing, and also enhancing visibility, which, as I just mentioned, can be really good for your scholarly reputation. You know, if someone reads your paper, the fact they didn't cite it isn't necessarily a bad thing. It means that at least that they've read it and they're maybe more aware of your work, which could be helpful if they're on a panel that you're applying for a grant to in future, for example. There's lots of reasons to disseminate to public and also to do public engagement. Enhancing visibility, accessibility, and transparency of both the science itself, but also the research process that got people there. In this era, a lack of trust in science is a problem in a lot of areas of society, and having this in-person interaction on social media can help with that. Of course, it bridges the gap between research and the public, as well as other important groups like policymakers. And increases dialogue, conversations, and interactions with a whole range of different audiences for whom your work might be important. And if it's just published as a scientific paper, they're almost certainly never going to see it or hear of it. And can also potentially combat misinformation and promote evidence-based discussions. There is an awful lot of misinformation on social media, which I've heard as an excuse or a reason to not want to be on social media. But I kind of feel like if all the people who are on social media are just spreading misinformation, then we're not countering that in any way. So there's a lot of work on how to do science communication better. And as Gregor said, that we can't do that in this short session. But training really helps. Any opportunity to do a science communication course, even very short, one-day ones or something, is really, really worthwhile. Also, choosing the right social media platform for what you want to achieve is vital. If you want to reach out to people in a particular area and none of those people are on the social media you've chosen, it's not going to work. Also, communication is well established to be a social and emotional process, much more than it is actually about the information sharing. And this is really, really important and explains a lot of what does well on social media and what doesn't. Storytelling in particular can be really, really important. This can really help bridge the gap between conveying scientific information, even if it's really complex, and also public perception. So, for example, I did a science communication course with Nat Geo, so they obviously, science communication and making money out of it is their thing. And they were saying that a surprising amount of stuff that does really well is less about, you know, having an insanely good image and more about the story behind it. And actually they found quite surprising things did really well. So just like stories that people could relate to, like, oh, we're here to research lions, but we can't go out today because it's raining. And that kind of story on Instagram actually way better than, you know, the absolutely fabulous picture of a lion, because people were like, oh yeah, this, I can relate to that. I also can't go out, it's raining today. So it's actually really simple storytelling that makes people feel like they know you or they can relate to you. It does remarkably well. And also for changing people's mind and facilitating understanding, a lot of the psychology literature shows that discussion is really important. And although a lot of social media is very vicious, antagonistic discussion, friendly group discussions can also take place and be really beneficial. And then very finally, just to touch on the importance of role models. In the absence of real life role models, scientists from minority backgrounds in science have an opportunity to present a normal everyday scientist who reflects groups who are underrepresented in science and hopefully encourage more of them as young people to join. And this can be particularly important on social media because although traditional media like television and cinema has the potential to do this, actually this type of media often reinforces stereotypes. So this took a long time to get to on AI, but I was trying to come up with a herpetologist studying crocodiles who wasn't a white man, and we got this very slightly weird image of a scientist eventually in a rainforest with glowing fungi, I think. Which highlights that addressing the representation gap is important. I think AI is a good example of how hard it is to get people from different backgrounds shown as scientists because it's based on this kind of pre-training. And so I will swap it for my mate Brinky, who is an awesome croc scientist and has done fantastic work trying to overcome the barriers to working with crocs as a woman in Gujarat. And studies have shown that content from people from minority backgrounds providing real life role models are really important in just being there doing everyday stuff. So normal everyday science, showcasing science in the making, sharing personal experiences. So yeah, if you are from a group and you would like more people like you to join science, this is also a really awesome thing to do. So I think thinking about how to work in networking and SciComm will go into a bit more detail and a bit more interactively. So yeah, thank you for your attention. I guess it would make sense to take a short break, maybe come back at 10 past. Does that sound good? Cool, see you all shortly.